Hey, can you hear me now? Hello. Guys, am I audible now?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, seems to be some disconnection. I was not able to connect. Anyway, we had to restart it. So is my screen visible to everyone?
Yes, Adam.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. Give me a small below. Okay. So just to continue, where we had left. So we're just trying to understand that, the basic workflow of Terraform is you write some configurations and do the init first, and then validate every time you modify to check is the syntax error, plan and verify the changes, and apply. Now in that we saw how you will be specifying the provider block and the resource block, right? So let's try to use the same against AWS. Okay, so in this example, what we will do, we'll try to connect to AWS. Okay. Now, once again, so we're going to have a new main.tf. And for this, the first block that you can see is a provider block for AWS. Okay. So here, this is the name of the provider. And within the provider, what are the details that you're going to give? So typically, you're going to give all the details which Terraform needs to know on how to connect to AWS. For that, you're going to tell the region, which is where I'm giving it as a Mumbai region, but we also need to give credentials, right? So to give a credential, so in AWS, if you go back, we have a concept called as the access key and the secret key. Are you guys aware of that?
Yes, it was in I.
Okay, so that is what we are going to use, because now when Terraform wants to connect to your AWS account, so it is going to do programmatically. So anytime if you want to connect to AWS programmatically, you will be using the access key and secret key specific to your IAM that is being created. Okay, so now what I'll do for this demo, let's create a IAM separately, or let me just go to my existing account. Okay, and I'll just try to create a new key. So I'm going to my account in AWS, and under that go to my security credentials, and in this go to access key, and this is where you have the access key and secret key. Now if you already have one, it should be good enough. In case if you do not have one, then just go ahead and create. So I'll just try to create a new key for this demo. Okay, and just make sure you note both of them. So I'll just take this. Okay, so this is going to be my access key and the corresponding password that I need. Now I want you guys to generate your own keys with the IAM that you have generated or you're using for your own purpose. Now, how is that you're going to give this? Now again, you can add it as a key within this block called access and secret key, but ideally that is not the best practice that you do. So one of the method, what I want to do is every time when I connect to a machine, I can make sure I will set up an environment variable in which these two values are available. So for that, what you do is kind of set to environment variable, or what you can also do is create a folder called .aws and a file name called credentials, and you can add this. If not, you can set up environment variable which will have these values. Okay, so what I want to do is whenever you're connecting to AWS, you need to make sure that these two are available. Okay, and in my case, just replace this with the key So I'm going to replace this key and replace this with the password. So this is what we are going to tell to Terraform to use. Okay. And now all I can do is go back to the machine. I'll again switch user as root because this is where we extracted Terraform. And here what I can do, I can just execute this command so that going forward, whenever you refer to this environment variable called access key and secret key, the username and password will be available, which is what Terraform is going to take. But every time when I log out and log in or something like this where network issues happens, and every time you connect to a machine, you need to run this command. Okay, so instead what I'll do, I'll create it in a file and I store it. Okay, so I'll just say aws_cred.sh and I'll put it up here. Okay, so every time when you log in, all you have to do is just run this. Okay, and you would be having your environment variable created. So this is one way you can simply do. Or what you can do is, for every account that you have, there will be something called as a login script in the SSH, right? So if you go to the home directory and check for .profile, if it is a bash shell, then you will get .profile, or there will be something called as .bashrc. So you can edit any of this file. Okay, and here you can see this is internally calling bashrc. So you can put it in any of the file. And in this file, you just go ahead and add this environment variable anywhere you want. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add these two here. Okay. So every time I log in, it will automatically be set. So I don't have to keep running any script or keep running this command separately. Okay, that's the only thing. If not, you can put it as a script and then call the script whenever you want. So these two are what you need to do. So this way, if you put this up, then when you run this provider, Terraform knows that if you have not given the credentials here, it will read from these two environment variables so that it will be picking up from there. Okay. Now, what is that you want to do in AWS? So just to take the very first step, let us just create a machine. Now for creating a machine in AWS, so you're going to need a specific resource, which is what is the resource type called AWS_instance. And the name for this block, I'm giving it as example. Okay. Now, what are the minimum requirements you need for creating a machine resource? One is what is the AMI ID, and then what is the type of machine. Now, all the other things what you don't give will be just default. Again, our interest is not to go into this machine, just to see how we can use Terraform to basically first connect to AWS. Okay. So with these two things, you can just go ahead and run. Now for this, what we have to do? So pretty much first we need to have a separate folder. Okay. So if you go back, this is where we had Docker. So instead of Docker, I'll create a folder called AWS. Okay. And I'll go to AWS and there is nothing. So first thing what I have to do is create a main.tf. Okay. And then what you have to do is workflow. So the first command is terraform init because it's the first time you're trying to set up. So when you initialize, you can see the plugins will be automatically downloaded. And because of this, you should see a .terraform folder, and inside this .terraform, if you see, there is the AWS provider or the plugin downloaded. Okay. So that's your first part done. Next, Terraform validate. Okay, my syntax is also perfect. And then Terraform plan. So here it will tell you that it is going to create one resource, which is a machine. Okay, and over this, the only information right now you have given is the AMI ID and the type, whereas all the remaining things will be obtained after it creates the machine. And now if I say Terraform apply auto approve, okay, then what it will do, it will create the machine. Okay, and it will wait until the resource is completely created, and then it will proceed further. Okay, so it says machine is created, and now if you say Terraform show, you should get the complete properties of the machine which is just now created, and you can see it has the full details. Okay, and if you go back and say Terraform plan once again, it should clearly say that the resource is already available, or the state what you have mentioned is one machine and that machine is available. To cross check, go back to AWS. So if I go back to EC2, so this, you can see that this is the machine that we created for Terraform, but just now this is the machine that we created using Terraform itself. Okay, and any changes that you do, it will try to update. And when you do not want, simply go ahead and destroy, and whatever the resources against the current configuration in AWS is there, it will go ahead and destroy everything. So you can see it's exactly deleting the machine which it is created, right? This is the machine it created, and it deletes only that. So whatever is that you have given in your state as a desired state in your configuration file, according to it, it will be maintaining the state, which is what when you say Terraform show, it will be displaying. Okay, so the resource is gone. You can see that's deleted. So if again run, so the plan this time it will say that there is no resources and it will create a resource. Anyway, I'm not going to create it. You can see, getting it? So going forward, anytime you want to connect to AWS, you need to make sure you're passing the credentials and you give a provider and tell under which region it has to create and what is the resource. And then these resources will be getting changed. We have to add more and more. Okay. So go ahead and try this. I'm just copy pasting in the chat. Can you quickly try? So try to first get your credentials, that is your access key and secret key, and then go ahead and create a new folder, add this file .main.tf, and then try to execute it. Can you try?
So can you show that command of bash rc where we directly inputted access key and secret key to that file?
Okay, so you can just say vi tilde, which is the home directory of the user as whom you are running. In that, there will be a file called .bashrc. So just edit this file and copy paste these two lines to it.
Yes.
Hello, Adam.
Yes.
In the bash RC file, should we also mention the dollar symbol along with that export two commands?
No, this is just for you to tell it's a command. Put only
So it's
this.
just the command, right? Not also hash, right?
No, no, no hash.
Because I've mentioned it and in the Terraform form plan it
Here.
shows an error.
Hash, that is when you edit it, sometimes you might get hash. So go into insert mode and then change it. So you should have only these two.
I
Uh,
just
we,
published this
we
too,
need
but
not we need not configure it right first because we don't have our AWS configured in this.
There's nothing needed to configure AWS. So you have connected to your AWS account, right? That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. Go to your AWS console and try to create a new access key and secret key. And that is what you're going to add. You need to do the
Uh,
AWS configure because if you're trying to use any AWS CLI, then you need it. So here we are not doing it. Terraform is going to need. So that way you're setting up these two.
yeah, but I'm getting an error regarding the configuration.
Have you used the AWS machine?
Yes.
I mean, which machine are you trying it from?
Uh,
For others, it's working.
No, no.
What is not working?
Showing is some syntax error.
That copy paste the exact content. So when you do a Terraform validate, what is it saying?
Init is not working. I haven't reached till Terraform validate.
What is init giving?
Just a minute. Huh?
Can you share your screen?
Yeah, sure. So after putting details in the bash RC file, what should we mention in main.tf? The EC2 provider, then the resource AMI instant type, and after that, do we need to write access key ID or secret key access?
Okay, so where have you added the entry? You have added in the bash RC. So once you have run,
Yes.
then you have to execute the bash RC once. So just say source in this file name so that the file will be getting executed, and just check whether you have the environment variable set. So after it is running, just see whether the access key secret key is available. So try to do echo dollar and see, because if you put it inside this, you need to first run this file for the first time because you have logged in. Because from the next time when you log in, this file will be automatically invoked.
Okay, so that I guess that's where I was going wrong.
Others are able to connect.
Yes, sir, I'm able to connect.
Hey, cool. Anyone else who is not able to connect?
So if we are running in bash rc the access key id and password, then do we need to mention about that in the main.tf file?
It's not needed. That is why we are not telling it. Because when you run, either you have to give it within this, or you set it as an environment variable, or if you do the AWS configure, right, the command, then it will create a file called AWS credentials in which this will get added. So you can do it in any three ways.
So if I'm adding in bash rc, my main.tf will end after mentioning instant type t.micro, right?
Yeah, you don't have to mention in the provider block.
It is showing as invalid character.
Can you check the typo, whether you have exactly entered properly? Take from the chat whatever I've given, just change your values.
Okay, it's running for me now.
Sorry?
I'm able to connect.
Okay, cool. Who else is not able to connect?
So could you check my screen?
Can you share your screen, please?
So you can send me the request for sharing screen. I can share it directly.
One second. Okay, I've just given you permission. Invalid character. Can you open the Terraform.tf? See if there is any syntax. After the AMI, is there a tab or a space? Can you just reduce it to one space? Can I try running now? Hmm, region AP South 1. This character is not used within the language. Did you change anything or just copy pasted the content I gave you?
I think you will have to download the AWS CLI, I guess.
No, that is may not be needed here because can you just maximize the screen? Can you maximize the screen? Okay, Terraform configuration must be valid. Okay, so basically it's not even thick. Can you edit the file once again? Cat main.tf, cat. Can you copy paste once again and that's what I'm just trying to see. Region. Okay, but it says invalid character somewhere. Can you copy the content? So where have you copied the content from the chat? No, no. Where did you paste? Did you paste directly from the chat to the? No, 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 no. I'm saying. Okay, can you do it again? Copy from the chat. Can you copy and paste it to a notepad first, and then from the notepad copy to this file? Not this. Can you copy the chat content, the YAML, sorry, the main.tf, whatever I've given. Can you copy from the chat? Okay, copy it here. Copy this and paste into your, yeah. Yeah, some characters I think were not proper. That's what it is. Yeah, it can run. Yeah, I can see. Terraform validate. Okay, yeah, Terraform plan. Okay, yeah, Terraform apply. Cool. Yeah, just make sure for some reason your terminal is not taking. So all the examples you copy first, copy to a notepad, and from the notepad you copy to your editor. Okay. Others, is everyone able to run this?
Yes, sir.
Everyone else? Hey, others, anyone who's not yet connected to the AWS? Rahul, Shubham, Humaira, Kajal, Mohammed,
Sir, Rahul
Uh,
able to connect.
Shraddha.
Connected, sir.
Shubham connected.
Okay. Guys, until you don't know, I would not be able to know whether you have an issue. So that's the reason I'm just calling out names. So please at least let me know, yes, that you have done. Okay. So far, so we are going through our fundamentals where we saw how do we kind of manage a resource definition, and corresponding to it, how do you define your provider and what is the Terraform workflow. Okay. And we just saw different examples. So let's take another topic. Okay. So there's something called as taint in Terraform. Okay. Now this is again a common word in a couple of other tools also. So what do you mean by the word taint? So by default in Terraform, when you define a state that you need, And if that resource is already available, then the next time when you go ahead and say Terraform plan, so Terraform will just say the resource is up to date. Okay, so it will not at all create the resource. Why? Because it's already available. That is what is your desired state. But for certain reasons, when you want Terraform to forcibly recreate a resource on the next execution of Terraform apply, then you need to mark that resource as taint. Or in the other way, if a resource has been marked as taint, and the next time when you say Terraform plan and apply, Terraform will go ahead and forcibly recreate that resource even when there is no change in it. That means even when the desired state is available, Terraform will do. Now, you can either find out if there is a resource which you want to forcibly recreate, and you can go and mark it as taint. If not, as we move forward, you will find out Terraform itself will be marking certain resources as tainted based on some conditions. Okay. Now, what are those conditions? So let's assume you are creating a machine, and at the end of the machine, after creating it, you are trying to do some updates on it. Now, assume machine creation is successful, but some kind of script or update command you are running inside the machine didn't work. Even though resource is created, but it is not successful because of certain reasons. So that is where Terraform will just say that resource is created, but is it successfully done? No. So those kind of reasons, Terraform itself will mark those resources as taint, so that the next time when you say plan and apply, that resource will get recreated. Okay. So in simple, if there is a resource which you want forcibly to recreate, then mark it as taint. Or if the resource has been marked as taint, on the next consecutive apply, the particular resource which has been marked as taint will be forcibly recreated. Okay. Now, same way, what do you mean by untaint? So if there is a resource which has been marked as taint and you want to remove that, then you can say untaint. So when you say untaint, that will not be forcibly recreated. So how do you manually do it? So this is where, like I said, Terraform itself will be marking certain things as taint. But if we need, how do we mark it as taint? Then you're going to say Terraform taint and what is the resource name? Now this is where going forward, when you refer to a resource, we know that within the configuration for each resource, there is a resource block and then a resource name. So what you're going to do is you're going to identify the resource by saying resource type dot name. Okay. Now, for example, so let's say take this resource. If I want to refer, then I should say AWS underscore instance dot example. Okay. Same way, if you go to this, if I want to refer to this, then I'll say docker underscore image dot my image. If I want to refer to this resource, docker underscore container dot my container. That way you should be referring. Okay. Now, to understand this concept of taint, so what we will do, we'll go back to our docker example. Okay. Now we have the same docker. So here, if you say first Terraform show, so there is one image and container available, and Terraform plan. So it says nothing is needed. Okay. Now watch this. Here, if you edit the main.tf, so you have told you need a Docker image resource for Nginx and create a Docker container resource with that. Okay. Now in this, what I'll do, okay, watch very carefully. Now I'm going to just change this Nginx, okay, to Apache. So HTTPD is the name of a Docker image which has Apache inside it. Now what I'm telling, I'm changing my image to Apache from Nginx. Okay. And what resource you have changed? Only this resource. However, Practically, if you see, the container resource is going to take this image only. And right now, if you change the image name, only this resource has been changed, and this resource will not at all be changed. But based on our practical requirement, if I change this, my container should also be recreated. Why? The earlier container is still going to use Nginx. So when I change my image as Apache, my container should also get changed from Nginx to Apache. That means it should recreate your container. Okay. Now what happens in this is, if I now run, it will not say both the resources are modified. It will say only one resource is modified. Okay, so watch this. So after changing, if I say Terraform validate and Terraform plan, so what does it say? Do you see? It's saying that it is going to change only the image. So this is one scenario where now I have my image, but there is no need for me to use the same container because the current container which is running is still based on your old image, which is Nginx. So instead of that, I want to change it to what? A new container based on Apache. But I want to keep the same name, everything. See, if I forcibly change some property here, then this will also get recreated. But logically, if you see, I want everything to be the same, but the only difference is when this resource changes, I want this resource also to get recreated, because now when it deletes and recreates, it will use the latest image, which is Apache, not Nginx. And that is where what you can do is you can apply the taint. So to apply the taint, what you have to do, so basically you're going to say Terraform taint and the resource type. Okay, so that way, if you go back to your Docker example, what was the object to which, or what was the particular resource to which you want to apply the taint? This one. So you're going to say Docker container dot my container. Okay, so watch the same thing. Now if I say Terraform taint my container, so this is the name. Okay, so you can see it's forcibly marking it, or marking the resource as forcible recreate. So now if you go ahead and say Terraform plan, you can see what is it doing now. Earlier it was showing only image, but now what is it saying? It is going to update the image resource. However, it's deleting and recreating your container resource, because the old container was referring to Nginx image, whereas when you change the image from Nginx to Apache, the container also should be recreated. Okay, so that is how when you say Terraform taint and then you go ahead, this time it will change. Okay, so first it downloads the respective image, and along with it, it is also going to destroy this and update. Okay, so it says there is a bug. Okay, let's see what it has done. Okay, it has not created the container. No problem. Let's try to run again. So it says now image is there, but container is not there. Why? Because we have applied the taint, so that way it knows that there is a change. So that's where it's trying to create. Okay, so let's apply this again. Okay, this time it created. Yeah, looks like some problem. But now if you run, you can see it is trying to create a new container in which Apache is running. So let's go back to our screen, what we had earlier. And if I access this now, you can see the container got changed from Nginx to now It is still taking the old one. Okay, let me show here. Curl localhost. Okay, so it's taking Apache. That's still not redirecting. But here you can see it's taking Apache, because for Nginx you used to get this, but right now from the machine directly you access, it is still trying to point to the same container, but the container is internally having the image based on Apache. Okay, now it got the cache was there. So you can see now it's referring to Apache. Okay, so this is where at any point of a time, if you have a resource which needs to be recreated forcibly, then we are going to mark it as taint. Okay, so just to show you again, Terraform plan, nothing, everything is update. So I'll change this again, this Apache to Nginx. And now when I say Terraform plan, you should see only the image resource is getting updated. So let me just go ahead and say Terraform apply. So you can see it's updating only image, right? So your container is still referring to Apache only. However, it would have changed the image from Apache to Nginx to refer. Okay, so it has not done anything to container. And this is where what I can do, I can mark this as taint. So Terraform taint and the exact resource, that is the type, provider, type, and then the actual resource. And now if you do a Terraform plan, so what is it saying? Image is already up to date. The only thing it has to do is recreate the container resource. So that is what it is saying. One resource will be destroyed and created. Okay. So now if you go back and apply, so you can see instead of Apache, it's trying to use the Nginx image. And if you just refresh, you can see you got the Nginx. Okay. So this is where, what do you mean by taint? If a resource is marked as taint, on the next execution of the Terraform plan and apply, even when there is no change, Terraform will be forcibly recreating the particular resources. So either you decide and apply the taint on a resource, or certain conditions, Terraform itself will mark the resource as taint. Getting it? Do you understood what you mean by taint?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you try running this once and see? All you have to do is say Terraform Terraform taint and the resource. So in your case, just go ahead and say Docker container dot my container, and then try to run the plan. For that, first go to the same Docker example, change the image and do a Terraform and apply, plan and apply, and then try to mark the container resource as taint. And then if you do the Terraform plan and apply, you will say next time it's getting recreated. Can you guys try it once and see how the taint works? Is everyone able to run it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. It is correct.
Okay. Anyone else who's still trying it? I can see you, Sushil. Okay, cool. So now let's look into the next topic. So what happens in Terraform when you create resources? Okay, Terraform doesn't know anything about the resources by itself. So we have to mention it somehow based on our requirement. Okay, so when you do not specify any dependencies, all the resources would be created in parallel. Okay, because what does Terraform do is when it is generating the graph, when there are no dependencies, it will just directly go ahead and generate a graph which says, okay, I need two resources to define my state, but for this, I don't find any dependencies between these two. So let me just go ahead and create them automatically. Okay, so the default behavior is when you have multiple resources, it will get generated in parallel. Okay, now to understand what we will do, let me create a new resource called AWS3 bucket. Okay, so in AWS, we know there is the S3 bucket. So what I'm going to do now is we'll try to add an example wherein this AWS, whatever you had earlier, right? So along to it, so what we will do now, I will add one more resource. Okay, so you can see there are two resources. So one is AWS instance, and now we are adding a new resource called AWS S3 bucket. Okay, now the name, whatever that we have, should be unique so that we know. Okay, so I'll just put this name. Okay, so I'm just trying to create a bucket with Visvatech Adam Demo S3. Okay, now make sure that it is completely unique. So here there are two resources. So when you try to run the plan, it will say it is going to create two resources. However, there is no dependency between it. So when you say apply, you should notice both of them getting created in parallel. Okay, so to do that, let's go back to AWS example, and this is where you have a separate folder. Okay, so just watch it. All I'm doing is adding a new resource called AWS S3 bucket. Now I don't have any such bucket, so I can go to services and storage. Okay, so here there's no such bucket. Okay, so let's go to our configuration. So what we have done, I've just added one more resource block. So there are two resources. Okay, and now if I run Terraform validate, so I don't have to run the init again because it's the same provider. And when I say plan, so you should see that it says two resources to be created. What are those? One is the S3 bucket, and the other one is the machine. Okay, and now watch this carefully. So when I say Terraform apply auto approve, so watch what happens. You can see both of them are getting created together. Okay, the completion might vary depending on what completes first, but do you see both of them just triggered at the same time? So it doesn't wait for each other, or there is no dependency that is being given. Okay, see, both got created, wherein this is also getting executed parallel and this is also getting executed in parallel. And if you go and refresh, so you have a bucket. And the same way, when we go back and try to destroy, it also does the same, wherein it will be just destroying in parallel because there is no dependency. You can see both of them just goes ahead and destroy. So creation or destroy happens in parallel by default when there is no kind of dependency between the resources. Okay, got this first? Hello?
Yes, Adam, we got it.
Okay. Now, yeah, quickly try this once before I take you to the next example. So all I want to do is, I want you to just add this to your current AWS example, okay? And then just try to recreate by saying Terraform plan and Terraform apply, and see both of them are getting created and destroyed together. Are you able to run?
Yes, it's running.
Yeah, I've given you access. You should be able to unmute your mic.
It's working.
Okay. Others? No, this just I wanted to see
So wait
quickly.
for a minute.
Okay, run it. Let me know once you've done.
Yes, sir, it is working.
Awesome. Okay,
Working, sir.
thank you. Okay, this was just to show you how Terraform takes by default the resources when the graph is generated. Okay, so let's come back to our actual problem. That how do I set up dependency in Terraform? So in Terraform, there are two types of dependencies. Okay, one is called as implicit dependency, and the other one is called as explicit dependency. Okay, so what do you mean by implicit dependency? So implicit means when you are creating one resource, if that resource uses any of the properties or attributes of another resource, then it becomes an implicit. So what do you mean by another property or another resource's property? So we know every time when you generate a resource, there are a lot of properties, or what we generally call it as attributes, which Terraform stores as part of the Terraform show. You have seen it, right? So now, if one resource in the same configuration refers to another resource property, then what does it become? So in order for you to complete the resource, you need a value from another resource. And when will you get the value from other resource? Only if that resource is available. So automatically, Terraform will first create the dependent resource, and then it will come to the resource in which you have told what value to use. So such a kind is what we call it as implicit. And to understand this, go back to your Docker example. Now this has everything in it. So if you go back to Docker example, now have you noted here that when I am creating a block for container, in the name of the image, I have not told the name as nginx or whatever it is given. Instead, we are telling go to this resource block, and in this resource block, there is a resource called my image, and inside that, when it is generated, there will be a lot of properties it is going to manage. Now in that, first you try to take the value of a attribute or a property called latest, and you replace this. Okay, so this is what we mean. So instead of the value, if you give what we call it as a interpolation in Terraform. So if you give the resource type dot resource name dot the attribute name of this resource, then Only if it is available, you will be able to get the attribute, right? If not, Terraform will say that you don't have anything. And this is where, in order for you to create this resource, Terraform would first create this. For that, it will go ahead and execute this resource block, and then it will try to generate. So this way, this is called as an implicit dependency. Even though you're not telling, Terraform knows that for running this, it needs this resource to be generated first. Okay, and that is where, if you go back quickly once to the Docker, and you say Terraform show, there's nothing. So now if I say Terraform plan, so it says two resource, one is container and image. And this is where here you can see under the image, there is a latest attribute which is empty, which will be known only after generating. And this is where, if you say Terraform apply, auto approve, okay. So what will happen? Watch this. So first, what is it creating? Image. And this resource, only when this resource completes, Terraform will go ahead and create another resource. Do you see? Only after completing this, then it goes ahead and generates this resource. This is because for this resource, you have an implicit dependency of an attribute from this image resource. Okay. And same way, if you say destroy, what will happen? It's the opposite. So what should get destroyed first? Image or container?
Container, sir.
Yeah. So it's in the reverse. Your container will first get destroyed. Only after that is destroyed, it goes ahead and destroys the image. Okay. So this is what we call it as implicit dependency. Okay. So to understand the implicit dependency with another example, let's go to AWS. Okay. So in AWS, now what we will do is we will try to add a new resource called Elastic IP. I think this is what you would have learned in AWS, that every time when you create a machine, it would have its own, what we call it as IP, which is your public IP or private IP. But eventually what happens, every time you recreate the machine, sorry, I mean, if you stop and start the machine, the IPs would change. So instead of that, you can give always a static IP by creating something called as Elastic IP service and adding that as a IP here. So right now this doesn't have any Elastic IP by default. Okay. So what we can do, we can actually create Elastic IP and assign. And this is where, when we try to take this example here for the same machine, watch this, what we have done. So I'm having two resources, and here, what is that I'm saying? So I'm saying that create a Elastic IP, and this is the resource type for it, and this is just our name. Now, for which machine you want to create Elastic IP? So that is where the keyword is instance, but the value for that, if you see, so what is that we are saying? So we are saying go to AWS instance, which is another resource in the same configuration. In that, check for example, which is this block, and in this there should be an ID generated, because once you complete this machine creation and if you do a Terraform show, you would have seen a lot of properties. One among them is ID. So that this is a implicit dependency. So what will happen now? Terraform will first create AWS machine and only then it will create the Elastic IP. Okay. So watch this. Okay. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep this also, and along with it I'll add. Okay. So now tell me, out of this, what and all resources it will be created. So first it will try to create machine and in parallel the bucket. Both of them will in parallel. However, once the machine is getting completed, and then what it will do is it will go ahead and create the elastic IP. So that way these two will get created in parallel, and then this will get created. Okay. Terraform validate, Terraform plan. So now totally 3 resources. Okay. So what are those 3? Bucket, S3 bucket, and you have the machine and the elastic IP. So these 3. So let's go ahead and say Terraform apply and watch what it will do. You can see machine and bucket is getting created together in parallel. However, only after completing the machine creation, it will take that. Okay, so only after the machine has been created or the resource has been created, it goes ahead with the elastic IP. Okay, and if you just see, so the new machine, whatever that you have generated, is the one. So, okay, it's not showing here. So this is the elastic IP for this machine. Okay. Same way, if I want to delete or destroy, it's the opposite. What will happen? So now first it should destroy the elastic IP, and then it will destroy the machine and bucket at the same time in parallel.
Why doesn't it delete the bucket and the IP at the same time? They are not dependent, right?
What is it?
Why doesn't it delete the bucket and the IP at the same time? They are not
Bucket,
dependent, right? IP.
where? Okay. Yes,
Okay.
because only the elastic IP has a dependency between machine. Bucket doesn't have, right? So when you do the reverse, bucket can get destroyed, but the first thing that it does is finds a dependency. So whatever you said is correct. So it
Okay.
goes with elastic IP, but while it is doing, you can also see the bucket is also getting destroyed. But only after the elastic IP is destroyed, it goes ahead with the machine. Getting this?
Yes,
So
sir.
such a kind of dependency is what we call it as implicit. So whenever you define in the value of a resource to refer to another attributes or another resource attribute, then this becomes an implicit dependency. And for specifying, you should say the AWS provider underscore the resource type, and then the resource name, and then the attribute for that resource. Okay, so only then it will be able to run. So quickly try running this once and see how it behaves. Is able to run?
Yes, it's running.
Others?
Yes, sir, it is working.
Yes, sir, it's working.
Okay. Anyone else who's still trying?
Sir, it is working.
Okay, cool. Anyone else trying out? Okay, so take a short break. Okay, it's 4:10. So for those who are still trying, just go ahead and complete it. So probably we'll meet back by 4:20.
Okay.
Okay, sure.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, take a break. For those who have not done, yeah, you also take a break, but just let me know whether you're still able to complete or not. Hey, is everyone back?
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, is everyone back?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Back.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I hope everyone tried this example, right? So what is implicit dependency? So a dependency where in one of the resource, we try to give the value which is an attribute of another resource. So this way, automatically Terraform knows that this is an implicit dependency and this will be created first and then this. But there are some resources where there is no dependency, but still you want to tell there is a dependency. Now those are called as explicit dependencies. Okay, so what do you mean by explicitly? So assume in this example, the bucket and the machine has no relation anywhere. Like logically, there is no relation for creating. But assume for my project, I want to first create a machine and only then create a bucket. So that way, if you want to explicitly tell that there is a dependency between these two resources, then you need to define a keyword called depends on. Okay, so that is what we call it as explicit. So all you have to do is use this keyword called depends on and tell the name of the resource. Then it will be ensuring that before you create this resource, it depends on something else. So this resource might be first created. Okay, so in that way, now let's assume that in this example, if I want my S3 bucket to be created after the machine is created, okay, then I'm just going to say here one more keyword called depends on. So now we are trying to say that this, okay, sorry. So if I want this, then I should change this to AWS instance, which is the resource type and then the name of the resource. Okay, so now what will happen? In the beginning, when it is trying to generate a graph, it sees where you have told the S3 bucket depends on this instance. So because of which, in order for you to create S3 bucket, first it has to explicitly create the instance and then come to here. Okay, so in the same previous example, whatever we had, I'll just add and you see the difference now. So let me edit. So here, if I add this, now what happens? So when you execute, so what is the first resource it will get created? Machine. And after that, it will create bucket and IP. But both can happen in parallel because there is no dependency between this. So that way, first machine will get created and at the same time, bucket and IP will create in parallel. Okay, but this will happen only after the machine creation. One is explicit, the other one is implicit. Okay, so this is the only keyword that you're going to add. So let's try to run. I can just, so Terraform validate, Terraform plan. So you should see 3 resources totally. Okay. And now let's quickly do a Terraform apply. And now watch this. First, the instance creation. And only when the instance creation is complete, it will go ahead and trigger the S3 bucket creation as well as the Elastic IP creation. Okay, you can see only after the machine is created, it's going ahead with bucket creation and the Elastic IP together. Okay, so the same when you say destroy. So what will get first destroyed? What resources will get destroyed now?
IP and bucket.
Yeah, and IP bucket.
Yeah, those will happen in parallel. However, after that, it go ahead with instance. Since there is a dependency on both, only when both of them has been destroyed complete, then it goes ahead with the instance. Okay. All right. Yeah. So if you want to specify explicit dependency, just add depends on. Okay. Can you quickly try this?
Yes.
So what is the actual advantage of this depends on mostly? Isn't it better
It,
that the resources get created parallelly?
it may not be always. There would be certain situations or scenarios where we need to wait. See, logically, Terraform doesn't know anything about it. So if you say I can create everything in parallel, but there might be some input that you need, which you need to make sure only when it gets created, right? So in those kind of scenarios, you have to wait. If there is nothing, then you can go ahead and create it in parallel. That's not a problem. But if there is, and logically there is no dependence with the, practically there is a difference, but logically there is no difference, then what will you do? So you have to go ahead and just add it. So that's what, if you have a requirement, add it. If there is nothing, then if you
Okay,
leave, it will create in parallel.
okay.
Yes, just try runs.
Aaron,
Yep.
uh, the dependency thing, in the dependency thing, the implicit and explicit are actually doing the same thing, right?
Yeah, both are the same.
So
So
why
you're
do you
telling
have
the
two
dependency.
different? It's just the way of writing.
It is not the way of writing. See, this is where if you look at this example, here, I don't have to tell anything. By automatically referring to the value or the attribute of another resource, Terraform knows there is a dependency. Okay.
Okay.
But in this, is there a dependency for S3 bucket to create based on machine, or do I need any value of machine in bucket? That is not at all needed. Then how will you sell that dependency? Because if I have some value, then I can give it like this in the attribute or any value. But if there is no dependency at all, then you have to need, or you need a way to specify it. Then in those cases, just go on and use this keyword called depends on and tell the resource name.
Okay.
Yeah, internally both of them doing the same, but when to use. So those changes. Try running it and see the difference.
Yes, sir, it is working.
Try running it.
Working.
Yes, sir, working.
Working, sir.
It is working.
Awesome. Okay. So as of now, clear with the concept called what do you mean by dependencies in Terraform? And basically, once again, just to iterate, by default, if there is no dependency between any resources, Terraform will create them in parallel, which is the default. But however, when there is a dependency between resources, one way is to tell by referring the attribute as a value to another resource, which is what we call it as implicit. But whenever there is no logical way to represent any dependency, then explicitly you can add a keyword called depends on, so that automatically Terraform knows that the other resource has to first generate and then your current resource. So this is how you're going to specify the two types of dependencies, explicit and implicit. Okay. Now, Let's move ahead to another topic called variables. Okay. Now, just like any other programming language or scripting, even in Terraform, you have the concept of variables, which you can reuse it. Okay. Because when you start writing your configuration, there are many values which we might have to reuse. So for all those scenarios, you have to define a new variable. Okay. Now, however, when we say variable, there are different types of variable, and how are you going to pass the values to the variable also changes. Okay. Now, when you have to define a variable, you're going to have a new block called variable block. So this is the third type of block which we are seeing. So we saw provider block and then resource block, and additionally now we are seeing a variable block. Okay. So whenever there's a need, you can create a new variable block, and for every variable that you have, you will have the standard keyword called variable followed by a name that you can give, and within that, what is the value that you want to keep to it. Okay, so these are options. And when you're creating a variable, so there are scalar variables or list or array and then map. But if you do not tell anything, by default it will always be a string or a scalar variable. Okay, so to understand this, now again, how do I retrieve the value of the variable? So if you remember in the interpolation, now this is for older version, but for new version, all you have to tell is the variable dot the name of the variable, and it will return you the value. Okay, so to understand what we will do, we will go back to our Docker example only and try to take this and add variables and see how it will be. Okay, so now in the previous example, in the image name and the resources, everywhere we have hard coded. So instead of that, now I'm going to create 4 variables. Okay, so here I'm saying a first variable, and the name of that is image name, and description is again optional, and default is also optional. But here I'm just saying default is nginx latest. So whenever you run Terraform, it'll always pick this y default. And remember, when I say default, that means you can also override the values, which we will see a little later. So now this is one variable block which defines a variable name and its value. The same way, I want to create another variable called container name, and the name of that or the default value for this is test me. And then I need 2 ports to specify. One is the internal port coming from the application which is running in the container, and the port which we have to map it into the host machine. That is what we call it as external port. Okay. Again, if you're not familiar with Docker, you can just ignore. Like I said, just remind me later. I'll share you some of the videos that you can just go through to brush up. But for now, this is the same example that I've taken. Here we have 2 port, right? Internal and external. So to replace this value, instead of hard coding, I'm going to use a variable and pass it accordingly. So that way, there is an internal port and there is a external port. Okay. So these two are there. Now, how do I use this? So that's where, wherever you need the values, all you're going to say is var dot the name of the variable. So the first variable that we created here, that is image underscore name. So that I'm replacing here, wherein the name of that is var dot image name. So what will happen when Terraform is getting executed? It will replace the value of the variable with whatever that you have defined or declared here. Okay. Same way, if you scroll down under the container, the name of the container, I'm getting this again a variable, and this is implicit dependency. But look at this. For the port, I'm trying to say the internal port and then external port. So everything wherever you want to take, you're just going to say var dot port and the var dot variable, that's external port. Okay. And now at every level, Terraform is going to replace this value. That is, when you say Terraform plan, it is going to take the value which is default and replace here, and then only it will plan. When you say Terraform apply, once again, it will try to take the default value and replace, and then apply. And when you say destroy, even at that time, the value should be there, because instead of the value we used to hard code, but now if you're creating a variable without a default value, then it will be prompting us to enter the value at all the three levels, whether it is a plan or apply or a destroy. It needs to know what is that. Okay, so let's run the same by taking this previous example. So what I'll do, I'll go back to Docker and let's just check whether anything is running. Nothing. So what I'll do here, I'll replace this with this. Okay, and now Terraform validate, Terraform plan. Okay, so you can see it's replacing the value appropriately. External internal port, the name of the image, and the name of the container. So these are the four variables that we have given. And further, if you say Terraform apply, it will again read the four variables, and for that we have given the default values. So based on that, it will try to create or download the Nginx image, and it's going to manage it. You can see, and Docker PS, you should see your Nginx is there. Okay, now if I just say destroy, this will again take the default value. Okay, this is what it is. Now what we did, we all gave the default value, but watch what happens if I remove the default value from something. Okay, so let's assume I remove this, so there is no default value I'm giving. So when you run, what will happen? During execution, Terraform will try to replace. At that time, this variable is not at all defined or declared, so obviously the value in the resource will also be empty. So how can it decide what it has to do unless and until it knows the complete details about resource? So it will prompt us to enter value. So that way, is it a syntax wrong? No, syntax is correct. The only thing is you have not given the value. So now if you do plan, the first thing it will do is, see, it's asking you to name this container, or it is asking you to enter the value of this container or a variable. Okay, so this is where once you give, so based on that it will generate. Same way, if you go ahead and say Terraform apply, even here to apply, what is the name of the container? It doesn't have anything, so you have to give the same. Okay, so remember, this will work only if it has the value. If it doesn't have, by default it will prompt. And if I destroy, same, what to destroy, it doesn't know, then it will ask. So every time the value that you're giving is most important. So that's where either you hard code it by saying default, or during runtime you can go ahead and pass this. Okay, now when you try to define a variable, it is once again not mandatory that you should be putting everything into one file. So as we move on, we might be able to get different files. And if you go back to the logic in the beginning, I said, when you run Terraform on an existing folder, it will read all the TF files in your current folder and then executes. So that way, I can create any Terraform file which is ending with .tf and put all the variables separately. So that way, your main.tf will contain your provider and resources, whereas your new file, which I can name it as variable or variables, will contain all the variables needed. Okay, so quickly to do that, I'll just copy this main.tf to variables.tf. Okay, and I'll edit this and I'll delete all these variables. Okay, so all I have is only image and the resource for container. And let's open the variables. And here I'll keep, I don't want the provider again because it's already there in the beginning. So I should keep only the variable definition. And let me remove all the other things. Okay, so now what happens? So in this, I have two files. One is main.tf and then I have the variables. So when Terraform runs, it will read both the variables and the main.tf together, and then it will know that, okay, we have defined it separately. So that is where it's not mandatory to put, and eventually this is one of the best practice. So we can give everything separately. Okay, so that now if you run, it is going to be the same way. Now it doesn't have the container name. So if you go ahead and say Terraform validate first, so it will read all the TF files and it will validate. And now when I say Terraform plan, you can see it is going to take the value from the user. Okay, so this is where based on what you have given, it will be trying to run. And when you try to run the Terraform apply, it is still going to take the same value. Okay, so this is where what you can do, you can define everything as a variable, wherein these are user defined variables, which you can either hard code it to be default, or we can also change it during runtime. Okay, now this is where we saw how do we hard code, but how do we pass it as a runtime variable? So this is where what you can do is, instead of hard coding, you can also pass it during runtime. So if you want to pass it during runtime, then what you have to do is you are going to use an additional option called -var and the variable name and the value. So when you're calling your Terraform plan or your Terraform apply or destroy, you're going to say -var and then the variable name and its value. Okay, now for example, I want to take the container name. So here I will say the variable name is container, and then I'll call it as new test. Okay, and watch this. So instead of prompting, now you can just pass it. So it takes this up. Okay, and same way, now if you want to do the Terraform apply, then same way what you can do, you can pass the Terraform apply auto approve, but along with this you can just pass the variable. So it will go ahead and create a new container called test me. That is new test me. You can see it's not prompting like earlier. So either you can go ahead and recreate, and what we can do is you can also, kind of ensure that either you pass it by hard code it, or you can just go ahead and hard code the default, or you can simply go ahead and just pass it during runtime. Okay, this is another way, but ideally now you can pass this also to destroy also. So this way you can here go ahead and pass. There you go, it will just try to take it. Okay, now can you just try this once? So create variables and first try to run with the default variable, and once it is done, try to change one of the variable and see whether it is prompting. or go ahead and try to overwrite by passing your own runtime variable. Again, this is just a simple variable that we are seeing. Can you quickly try this? Meantime, any questions?
Best practice would be to put the default value inside the TF files only.
You can put default, but you can also overwrite it. Because it's always a good thing that you have a default value, but you can go ahead and overwrite anytime by passing it through the command line. Because if you don't give a value, what will happen? It will be prompting. So that way you don't want to prompt. So you can set certain default, but any point of time you can always overwrite it.
Yes.
Hey, let me know if you have tried executing. Has anyone tried it?
Yes, it's working.
Cool.
And just one question, why do we need to add this where attribute while doing Terraform destroy?
Once
So
again, it reads, see, what it does is every time Terraform reads the configuration file, and it will try to know the desired state. Okay, because destroy means what it has to destroy. So that's where it's always a combination of what you have given in your configuration file, and then based on that, it will be preparing what it has to do.
okay.
Okay, others? Were you just able to run this once?
It's working, sir.
Hey, thank you. Everyone tried it once?
Yeah, it's working for me.
Okay. Now what happens, sometimes there might be multiple variables that you have to update or pass it during runtime. Then what will happen? But you might not be able to pass multiple variables like this because the line will be too huge and there might be some problem. So instead, in Terraform, you can create a variable file and you can pass all the variables through the file in one shot. Okay. So what you can do, the same activity, whatever that you're trying to do, you can typically try to say Terraform plan and pass the option called -var-files. So the only difference is instead of passing it individually, what you can do, you can create it as a file. And in this file, whatever the variable that you want to pass, you can pass it in the fashion of a variable equal to value. Okay. Now, for example, if I want to pass the same container name, then I can just go ahead and say variable name and whatever the value. Suppose if you want to make it as again the test me again, and for every variable you can put a line, and in that line you can give it. Suppose if I want to pass more than one, then you can ideally add it. Okay, so watch what we will do. So first I'll create a file. Okay, so here I'll just give any name, but the file should end with .tfvars, so it indicates that it's a Terraform variable file. Okay, so that is what I'm just going to pass here. And in this file, I'll just give the same the variable called container name. Okay, so the difference now, when I try to call, instead of passing it like a command line argument, you can pass multiple variables together. Okay, so you can see it takes the image name, but container name, you can see it has taken from the file, which is what we had given it as test me again. Okay, so this is where what you can do, you can pass a file or a variable file in which you can have multiple variables put together. Okay, so it's completely up to the user to choose whether to pass it in by default, or you can override by passing it through command line as one variable at a time, or if you want multiple variables to be updated at the same time, you can put it in a file and invoke it. Okay, however, whenever you have such a kind of scenario, so we are kind of passing the variables to all of them, right? Now this is where what happens is, in Terraform plan, while you're doing a plan, you can pass some variable, whatever it is, but while you are passing, you can actually add one more argument, which is called as a output file. So for any plan that you're doing, you can also equally generate a file, so that for later references, when you are trying to do something like apply, you can directly tell the apply to read from this output file, which it has the output of the plan. So that's where when you're running a plan, you can also give a output file. Okay, so I'll just say something like plan output. It's just a text file. So what will happen now? So you do not have any file as such. Okay, so let me just run. What is wrong? It's not taking. So I forgot the syntax. Is it correct? Let me just check quickly. Oh, okay. So you have to give hyphen out. Sorry for that. So you're going to say hyphen out and then the name of the file in which the output would be stored. So now if you run, what happened? It generated a plan, but that got saved into a file, if you can see. Okay, and this is where you should see a plan dot output. Okay, and it's more of a binary file. So this is where the plan has been stored. And now when you're trying to run the Terraform apply, you can basically say the name of the file and it will try to read from this. Okay, so now here you can see it didn't ask as to enter the variable again, because directly it can read from the file, which is the plan output. So that way, whenever you generate a plan, sometimes you can generate multiple plans, change your configurations and generate different plan, and based on that you can specify what it has to apply. So while you're applying, you can specify what is the plan output file from which it has to read. And the same way, when you say destroy, you can also say, okay, it doesn't call, fine. So let's go auto approve. Looks like a new version it's not taking. But here I need to pass. So what was that? Test me again. Okay. So pretty much it's kind of taking only for the apply. But again, here also you can just go ahead and say auto approve. So what you can do now is, whenever there is a need, at times where you have to do different plan, then you add the option called as -out and specify a file name. It could be anything. And when we are trying to do a Terraform apply, here you're going to just say the plan file. So if you go back to the basic syntax, here you can say -out, okay, and then you will say output file, and then when you say Terraform apply, so here you will say the out file. Okay, so the same thing, it will try to pick it up. All right, so try this once quickly. Okay, everyone tried it?
Yes, sir.
Others? All right, awesome. So now we were trying to see that, how do we create a variable and how do you separate it into a different file and put it as a variable block, and for each variable have a separate variable block, and either you can put a default value or you can pass it through command line as a single variable, or you can put it as a file and combine and give it together. Now what we saw was just a string or a scalar variable. But if you have multiple values to be passed, then you need to create the variable as the type called list or array. Okay, so if you see this, now the same example whatever we had earlier. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to create a variable, and here I'm going to say the variable type is list, because right now we didn't say anything so far, right? So that was more of a scalar. But now when I say list, what it means, it is going to create a set of values, and this is where I'm giving two values. Okay, so one is Nginx and the other one is Apache. So when you want to retrieve, so whenever we have a list or an array, we should be referring to the index number, and that is where while retrieving, you're just going to say a square bracket and give the index number. So we know that array always starts with index of 0. So if you say index 0, then it will take this. And if you say index of 1, then it will be trying to take this value. Okay. So that way you can specify which index that you want. Okay. But here, since it is a list or an array, you're trying to specify in a square bracket. So square bracket indicates multiple value and this is an array where while choosing you need to specify what is the index number. So watch this. Now for this, what I'll do, I'll remove this variables.tf because I don't need it. Now let me go to main.tf and I'll just replace this values. Now why I removed variable.tf, because when you run there will be Terraform execution which will read all the variables together, right? And it will be reading all the files and all the variables. So that is where I don't want that to be available for now. But eventually I can put these two separately into variables.tf. Now instead, just for keeping it simple, I'm putting it together. Okay. So now when I run, what is the image that it should take? Nginx. So Terraform validate. Okay, and then if I say Terraform plan, you can see it is taking Nginx latest. Now, if I change this to 1, okay, and watch this, the same thing if I say Terraform plan, instead of Nginx, it will be taking Apache. Okay, so that's the only difference. So you can create a variable which is a scalar, but explicitly if you are having more than one values, then you have to specify the type as list. Okay. However, there is another type where you have a mapping, which is what we call it as hash or map. So in this, the problem is when you have a huge list, giving the index number will be a challenge because you don't know where exactly is the value. And that is where, similar to scripting or Python, so you can create this variable as a map wherein for every value you give a unique ID, and instead of the index you can specify the key which will be mapped to each value, and easily you can retrieve. So if you have a requirement to generate a variable of the type map, then the same example, what you have to do is define it as a type called map. Okay, so watch this here. And now the basic difference is the type is map, and when you're defining the default variables or the values, instead of the square bracket you are going to give flower bracket. So this is what in the morning I was explaining what is the default of HCL syntax. Okay, so if you are getting a square bracket, then it indicates it's a list, and if you are having flower bracket, then it is a map, wherein for the same value you are giving two keys. Okay, so I am giving a key called test and the value, and prod and the value, so that when I'm coming to this variable using it, I can just simply say in the square bracket the key name, and now what will it return? Nginx latest. Instead of this, if I return prod, specify the key name as prod, it will be returning Apache. So this is how, depending on what kind of variable that you're giving, you should also change the interpretation. Okay, so let me show you this example of it. Now let's change this. Okay, so Terraform validate, Terraform plan, and you can see it has taken Nginx latest because what we have given is the keyword to refer to test, and test refers to Nginx. Now if I change this to prod, you can see instead of Nginx, it should be referring to Apache. So it's Nginx now. So let's go ahead and plan again. You can see it takes Apache. So this is where, what is the type of variable that you're giving, you should know, and based on that in the interpolation you need to change accordingly, because if it's a string or a scalar, you just give variable dot variable name. But if it's a list or an array, you need to specify the index number. But if it is going to be a map where you have a key and a value, then give the key. Now, why is that we are seeing these two? This is because it is not that you will always be defining a variable. Sometimes the output of a Terraform show, if you see, it will be capturing some values, and that can also be returning you an array or a map. So that is where at any time, whether you are defining a variable or whether there is a variable which is getting created during runtime, or Terraform is trying to give you some values, or if you are capturing that, and if that is what you are trying to retrieve, and try to remember, if it retrieves something with a square bracket, then it is called as a list. Then wherever you want to use appropriately, you should give the index number. But if you see a variable where, or a return value where you see a flower bracket and within that multiple values, then immediately you should know this is a variable of the type called map. And wherever you are doing the interpolation, that immediately you should think of using the key name appropriately, using which the value will be generated. Okay, so that's how what we will be doing is, as we move forward, whether you create a variable or whether there is a runtime variable created or Terraform is passing, you should be able to capture the values. But for capturing, so you should know what type of variable that you are trying to get it. Okay, so that's where it's quite important that in Terraform you also know these two type of variables. Getting this? Any questions? Hello? Guys, are you there? Any questions?
No, sir, not as of now.
Not questions. No questions.
So yeah, pretty much if you see, this is the basics of, or what we call it as, the Terraform fundamentals. Okay, because now you have understood the basic concepts. So if you go back quickly what we saw today, so we quickly understood, how does a Terraform work. So the workflow for a Terraform is write the code, and then you kind of review that code, and then plan it, and then apply. So this is what we know. But when you're trying to write a Terraform, so the basics that we know is always start with a TF file, which is main.tf, and in that provide your provider block and all the resource block. And anytime that you want to initiate, or the first time, you have to do the Terraform initiate or initialize to make sure that the plugins are downloaded. And post that, you validate, you plan, and you apply. However, if there is a dependencies, then we saw that we are going to specify implicit or explicit. And anytime if a resource is marked as changed, then it will be getting recreated. And again, if there are no dependencies specified for any resources, it will be generating it in parallel. And finally, rather than hard coding some values, you can create variable and pass, out of which what we saw is a user defined variable where you will be having a separate block, and using that you will be defining, but the value can be hard coded by default or passed through runtime using a command line option or through a file. Okay, so this way, with this basics, what we will do is tomorrow we'll jump into the further topics, which is where we have the Terraform advanced topics, where we will try to learn few more blocks and few more concepts with what we have done. Okay, so that's how we will be going. And now every time we take one new concept, we will try to take some example. When eventually once you know everything, then we will take a full real-time example where if I now say, okay, create a VPC, create a load balancer, create a what we call it as the machine, or create your internet gateway. So you should be able to put everything together what we have learned. Okay, so that's where in the advanced we will be seeing a couple of other concepts. In fact, more things are there on advanced, but before we go, these are the basics which is going to be helpful for you to do the further things. Okay, so any questions or doubts in what we saw today, or in any of the topics of Terraform workflow, fundamentals of Terraform, or variables, or taint, or conditions, the executions of how do you specify dependencies? Any questions or doubts?
No, sir.
No questions.
All right, cool. If there's no questions, then let me stop it today. But anyway, I'll be there for another 5 minutes just in case if someone wants to run the last example that we gave, right? So let me know if there is any doubt if you have in the last example. But if not, thanks for joining, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 9:30.
Sir, could you please share a resource file in which whatever commands we perform today, we can get a copy of the same?
Yeah, I'll try to share this through email or somewhere because that's what I was asking for a link. But anyway, I need your email for this, right? Because how do I send it? No, this is available in the chat. If you can just go back and take. If not, I need your email IDs. So can you just forward some email ID so that I can send it across?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, that'll be great. If you can just drop me a mail and then I'll just send it across. Okay, it'll be great if someone can consolidate and send it. Not, it'll be difficult for me. Can you do me that favor? Okay, I'll give you my email. Okay, so probably what I want you guys to do is, can someone consolidate and send the email to this? I'll put it in chat. So if anyone of you can take a responsibility and collect all your emails and put it to me to this, right? I'll just forward across the content. That'll be great.
Okay, Adam, that would be done.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Any questions or doubts? Kajal, I didn't get your question. What is that? What type of assessment are you referring here? Exams, no, I'm not sure, because what they were saying is that post this, you should be preparing yourself for the certification. So that's the reason I'm going in little slow and deeper so that you understand the concepts, because learning Terraform is not just that you take one example and just see how AWS machine gets created, because basically in your exam or certification, they'll be asking you different questions where you need to understand the logic, right? So preferably if you're talking about that, I believe it's more of the certification exams that you have to take. But right now, all the examples that I'm giving, you can just go back and practice. So what I'll do is at the end, like I said, may not be like a complete assessment, but I'll give you a full example of various scenarios, which I will explain you how it is being written, and then you can just try to take that and execute and see how it works, so that whatever you have learning for the first 2 days, it should be completely consolidated and put together as a real-time example. Got it? All right. Then if you guys have no questions, right, then I'll do one thing. Just send me a mail and I'll just update the same,
So
whatever the
I
daily
have
limits
sent
that
an
we have.
email right, just 10 seconds
Okay.
ago, I guess. Just now I sent an
Sure,
email.
sure. Sure. I'll check and update in some time. Thanks a lot. All right. Sure, guys. Do let me know if there's any questions, or just go through this today, and in the morning tomorrow, if you have time, just let me know if you have any doubts or anything that you wanted to recap today, and then we'll start with that tomorrow. Okay. Sure. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow then. Have a good evening. Yeah. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.